My daughter said her ex was abusive, so I did something no one expected. It was a Tuesday evening in early fall, the kind where the light slants through the kitchen window like an accusation, turning the granite counters gold but leaving the corners shadowed, and I was chopping carrots for stir-fry, while the radio hummed some forgettable pop song in the background, my mind half on the client email I needed to send before bed, and half on whether Emily had finished her college applications. She'd been so distant lately, holed up in her room with her laptop, barely touching the dinners I'd leave on trays outside her door, claiming migraines or study fatigue, but I chalked it up to senior year stress. The way kids pull away before they launch into the world, and as I scraped the orange peels into the compost bin under the sink, the front door clicked open, and there she was, my 20-year-old daughter, home from her part-time job at the bookstore downtown, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her dark hair messy from the wind, but her face... God, her face was pale as the skim milk in the fridge, eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying on the bus ride home, and she dropped her bag by the coat rack with a thud that echoed too loud in the quiet house, where her father, Tom, was upstairs in his home office wrapping up a Zoom call with his engineering team, and she said, "Mom, I need to talk to you," her voice cracking like thin ice underfoot, and I set the knife down, wiping my hands on the dish towel hanging from the oven handle, my heart already picking up speed because Emily didn't need to talk unless it was serious, not since she was little and confessed to breaking my favorite mug. So I nodded toward the living room, flipping off the stove burner as we went, the half-chopped vegetables forgotten, and we sat on the worn leather couch that sagged in the middle from years of family movie nights, the throw pillows I'd bought on sale at Target still smelling faintly of lavender from the dryer sheets, and she curled her legs under her, picking at a loose thread on her jeans, avoiding my eyes, and I waited, the clock on the mantel ticking like a countdown, until she whispered, "It was Jake," her ex-boyfriend of 2 years, the one she'd broken up with 3 months ago, the charming college sophomore with the easy smile and the internship at that tech startup, the one we'd all liked at first, Tom even grilling burgers with him in the backyard last summer, laughing about fantasy football. But then things soured, arguments she dismissed as normal couple stuff, and now her words hung there. It was Jake. And I leaned forward. "What about Jake, honey?" Though a cold dread was already uncoiling in my gut, the kind that comes from too many news articles scrolled through on my phone late at night, stories of young women and hidden bruises, and she took a shaky breath, her hands twisting together, knuckles white. He was abusive, Mom. Not just yelling, but hitting, controlling everything, who I saw, what I wore. It started small, jealousy stuff, but then, and she trailed off, lifting her sleeve just enough to show a faded scar on her forearm, thin and pink like a cat scratch, but longer, deliberate. This was from when I tried to leave the first time. And the room tilted, the air thickening like before a storm, my breath catching as if I'd been punched myself, because how had I not seen it? Me, her mother, the one who bandaged her knees as a kid, who drove her to soccer practice in the minivan with snacks in the glove compartment, who noticed when she switched shampoos but missed this monster lurking in her life. And tears welled up in my eyes, hot and unbidden, as I reached for her hand, but she flinched slightly, a reflex that broke something inside me, and I pulled back, whispering, "Oh, Em, why didn't you tell me sooner?" And she shrugged, tears spilling now. I was scared, ashamed. He said no one would believe me, that I was overreacting. And the anger surged then, a white-hot wave crashing over the shock. Not at her, never at her, but at him, at myself, for the blind spots in my vigilance, for the times I'd waved them off on dates, smiling from the porch, thinking she was safe, happy. And Tom must have heard the raised voices or sensed the shift, because he came downstairs, his reading glasses perched on his head, asking, "What's going on?" in that calm engineer voice he uses for fixing leaks or debugging code. And Emily repeated it all, haltingly, the words tumbling out like stones from a wall crumbling, the slaps, the isolation, the threats whispered in her ear at parties where everyone else laughed obliviously, and Tom's face drained of color, his fists clenching at his sides as he paced the rug, muttering, "That bastard," under his breath. And I stood, pulling Emily into a hug she finally allowed, her body rigid at first, then softening, sobs shaking us both, the scent of her vanilla body spray mixing with the salt of tears. And as the evening deepened, rain starting to patter against the windows like hesitant knocks, we sat there in a huddle, the stir-fry abandoned, takeout forgotten, and I felt the raw pain carve into me, guilt twisting like a knife for every missed sign, the long sleeves in summer, the canceled plans, the way her laugh had dimmed, and the immediate fallout hit like aftershocks, Tom suggesting we call the police right then, his phone already in hand. But Emily shook her head. "Not yet, Dad. I need time." Her voice small, exhausted, and I nodded, though my mind raced, because reporting it felt right, but insufficient, like bandaging a wound without cleaning it. And as we helped her to bed later, tucking her in like she was 10 again, the glow of her nightlight from childhood still plugged in, I lay awake beside Tom in our room, the sheets tangled from our restless turning, his hand finding mine in the dark, squeezing, but sleep evaded me. The betrayal, not hers, but the world's, for allowing this to happen to my girl, gnawing at my insides. And by dawn, as the first light filtered through the blinds, casting stripes on the carpet, an idea formed, reckless, unexpected, born from that maternal fury that overrides reason. I wouldn't just support her through therapy or legal channels, the expected paths of reports and restraining orders. No, I would confront Jake myself, not with violence or screams, but with a calculated exposure, tracking down his family, his workplace, laying bare his actions in a way that ensured he couldn't hide, couldn't charm his way out, because sometimes protection demands stepping into the shadows yourself. And as I slipped out of bed, brewing coffee in the quiet kitchen, the machine gurgling like a secret accomplice, I knew this was the something no one expected, least of all me, a suburban mom with a desk job and a hybrid USB. But for Emily, I'd become the avenger she didn't know she needed, the pain fueling a resolution that felt both terrifying and inevitable, the fallout rippling outward as I planned my first move, a quiet search on my laptop for his address, the screen's glow illuminating my tear-streaked face in the dim morning light. That first night after Emily's confession stretched into something endless and suffocating, the house settling around us like it was holding its breath, every creak of the floorboards or hum of the refrigerator sounding too loud in the silence we couldn't fill. I made tea, chamomile, the box I kept for sleepless nights after deadlines or when one of the kids had a fever, because it felt like the only normal thing left to do, pouring 3 mugs even though Tom said he didn't want any, setting them on the coffee table where rings from years of condensation had already stained the wood. Emily sat cross-legged on the couch again, wrapped in the old gray blanket she'd claimed since middle school, the one with the frayed edge she used to chew when she was anxious. And now her fingers kept tracing that same thread, round and round, as if it could anchor her. Tom paced between the living room and kitchen, stopping every few minutes to stare out the rain-streaked window at the dark streetlights blurring into halos, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he couldn't spit out yet. I sat beside her, close enough that our shoulders touched, but not crowding, because I'd already learned that lesson once tonight when she flinched at my hug. I kept my hands in my lap, palms up, empty, waiting for a permission that might never come. She started talking again around 11, voice hoarse from earlier crying, pieces spilling out in no particular order. The first time he grabbed her wrist too hard at a party and left fingerprints she hid under bracelets. The way he'd check her phone while she showered, and then act hurt when she got mad. The night he locked her in his apartment after an argument about her studying late with friends, saying it was for her own good, how she'd sat on the bathroom floor texting apologies to him through the door until he let her out at dawn. Each detail landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading through me, through Tom, who finally stopped pacing and dropped into the armchair across from us, elbows on knees, face buried in his hands for a long minute before he looked up, eyes red, and asked quietly, Did he hurt you worse than the arm? Emily nodded once, small, then lifted the hem of her hoodie just enough to show a purplish-yellow bruise low on her ribs, the kind that takes weeks to fade, and said, This was 2 months ago. I told him I was done. He said if I left, he'd make sure everyone knew I was crazy, that I'd made it all up for attention. The room went so quiet I could hear the rain ticking against the gutters, steady as a metronome counting out guilt. I wanted to scream, to drive to his parents' house right then and pound on the door until they understood what their son had become. But instead, I reached, slowly, for her hand again, and this time she let me take it, her fingers cold, trembling, and I held on like I was afraid she'd disappear if I let go. Tom stood, walked to the hallway, came back with his laptop, opened it on the ottoman, and started typing, searching for domestic violence hotlines, legal aid resources, screenshots of restraining order paperwork he'd pulled up before. But Emily shook her head hard. Not tonight, Dad, please. I can't do forms and questions right now. He closed the laptop without a word, set it aside, and moved to sit on her other side, the 3 of us squeezed together on the couch now, a clumsy, aching unit, his arm around her shoulders, mine around her waist, and for a while we just breathed. The kind of breathing that hurts because every inhale reminds you the world kept turning while your daughter was breaking. Around 1 in the morning, she said she was tired, that she wanted to sleep in her old room instead of the apartment she'd been subletting near campus, so we walked her upstairs, past the framed photos on the wall, her gap-toothed kindergarten smile, the 3 of us at the beach with sunburned noses, her high school graduation where Tom and I had cried unashamedly on the bleachers, and I turned down her comforter, the one with tiny stars she'd picked out at 12, plugged in the little salt lamp she still liked because the soft orange glow helped her fall asleep. She changed into pajamas while I waited in the hall, then climbed in, pulling the covers to her chin like a shield. I sat on the edge of the mattress, smoothing her hair back, the way I used to when nightmares woke her as a child, and whispered, You're safe here. Always. She nodded, eyes already closing, exhaustion winning at last, and when her breathing evened out, I stayed a few more minutes, watching her face relax and sleep, the lines of worry smoothing away, before I slipped out and closed the door softly. Downstairs, Tom was in the kitchen, rinsing the untouched mugs, shoulders hunched, and when I came up behind him, he turned, pulled me against his chest without speaking, and we stood like that, under the pendant light, the dishwasher humming its low lullaby, his heartbeat fast against my ear. I keep thinking, he said, finally, voice rough. All those times she canceled plans, said she was sick, and I just believed her, didn't push. I nodded into his shirt, the cotton damp from my tears I hadn't noticed falling again. Me too. We didn't say much after that. We turned off lights, checked the locks twice, climbed the stairs together, and when we got to our bedroom, I hesitated at the door, suddenly unsure if sharing the bed felt right tonight, if the ordinary closeness of brushing teeth side by side and sliding under the same sheets was too much normalcy when everything else had cracked open. Tom saw it in my face, touched my arm gently. "I'll take the couch if you need space." But I shook my head. No, I needed him close, needed the solid weight of him beside me to remind me we were still a family, still in this together. So we got into bed, lights off, the rain louder now, drumming on the roof like it wanted in. I lay on my side facing him, he on his, and in the dark our hands found each other across the mattress, fingers lacing tight. Neither of us slept much. I listened to the clock radio click over to 2, then 3, then 4, my mind replaying every moment I might have missed, every time I'd smiled at Jake across the dinner table and thought he was good for her. Tom's breathing stayed uneven, restless, and once he whispered, "We'll fix this." But it sounded more like a prayer than a promise. By the time gray light started leaking around the blinds, my eyes burned, my body heavy with the kind of fatigue that comes from crying until there's nothing left, and I knew the confession was only the beginning, that the real work, the slow, painful untangling of shame and fear and rage, was just starting to surface. Emily would wake soon, come downstairs in sweatpants and yesterday's hoodie, and we'd have to face daylight, breakfast, the question of what came next. But for those last dark hours, we lay there holding hands, two parents who had failed to protect their daughter and were now clinging to each other so we wouldn't drown in the guilt. The rain outside softening to a drizzle, the house quiet except for the faint sound of our daughter's steady breathing down the hall, proof she was here, safe at least for tonight. The next morning arrived gray and heavy, the kind of February day where the sky looks like wet concrete and the air smells faintly of exhaust even through closed windows, and I woke to the sound of the coffee maker gurgling downstairs. Tom must have set the timer the night before out of habit, because neither of us had slept enough to function without caffeine. My eyes felt swollen, gritty, as if I'd been crying in my dreams too, and when I rolled over, the other side of the bed was already empty, the sheet cool where Tom had been. I pulled on yesterday's cardigan over my pajamas, the soft wool still carrying the faint scent of Emily's shampoo from when I'd held her, and padded downstairs barefoot, the hardwood cold against my soles. In the kitchen, Tom stood at the island pouring 2 mugs, steam rising in lazy curls, his shoulders rounded like he was carrying something heavier than the pot. Emily wasn't there yet. Her door upstairs was still closed, and I didn't want to knock too soon. Didn't want to jolt her awake into the reality we'd all have to face again in daylight. Tom handed me a mug without speaking, the ceramic warm against my palms, and we stood side by side looking out the window at the backyard, where last year's leaves still clung wetly to the grass, the swing set from her childhood days rusted at the joints, but still standing. "We can't just let this sit," he said finally, voice low so it wouldn't carry upstairs. "She needs to know we believe her, that we're going to do something." I nodded, sipping the coffee, too strong, the way he always made it when he was upset, and felt the bitterness match the ache in my chest. "But she said not the police yet. We pushed you hard and she'll shut down again." He rubbed a hand over his face, stubble rasping. "I know, I keep picturing him out there, going to class, laughing with his friends like nothing happened." The image twisted in me too, a fresh stab, but I swallowed it down. "We start with what she'll let us do. Protect her first, keep him away." That became the quiet mantra as the morning unfolded in small, deliberate steps. Emily came down around 10, hair in a messy ponytail, wearing the same hoodie from last night, sleeves pulled over her hands like armor. She hesitated in the doorway, eyes flicking between us, as if gauging whether the air had changed overnight, whether we'd start asking questions or demanding action. I kept my voice soft. "Coffee or tea?" She chose tea, herbal, no caffeine. She said her stomach was still knotted, and sat at the table while I filled the kettle, the click of the burner igniting the only sound for a minute. Tom stayed standing, leaning against the counter, giving her space. When the tea was ready, I set the mug in front of her, sat across the table, and waited. She stared into the steam for a long time before speaking. "I don't want to tell anyone else yet. Not my friends, not Aunt Lisa, not anyone at school. They'll look at me different. Or worse, they'll pity me." The words landed like stones. I understood the fear, the way shame clings even when it's not yours to carry. "Okay," I said. "We don't tell. Not until you're ready." Tom nodded too, though I could see the effort it cost him. "But we need boundaries," he added gently. "For now. No answering his texts, no meeting up to talk. Block him if you haven't already." She had, she said, weeks ago, but he'd used a friend's phone once, sent a long message apologizing, saying he'd changed, begging her to meet so he could explain. She deleted it without replying, but the fear lingered, though what if he showed up at her job or outside her apartment? That was when the practical side kicked in, the part of parenting that feels like building a fortress brick by brick. We decided, no grand declarations, just quiet rules. She'd stay here at home for the foreseeable future, no going back to the sublet until we felt safer. Tom would drive her to her shifts at the bookstore instead of her taking the bus. I'd pick her up after my last client call of the day. We'd change the locks on the front and back doors, not because we thought he had a key, but because the act felt like reclaiming control. And we'd start a simple safety plan. She'd text us when she left work, when she arrived anywhere, a habit we framed as just while things settle, so it didn't feel infantilizing. Emily listened, nodding slowly, and when we finished, she looked up, eyes glassy but steady. Thanks for not freaking out and calling everyone. I reached across the table, palm up again, and this time she placed her hand in mine without hesitation, her fingers warmer now from the mug. The moment felt fragile, like the first crack of light after a long storm. Later that afternoon, while Emily napped on the couch with the blanket pulled high, Tom and I sat in the dining room with laptops open, researching quietly, hotlines we could call anonymously for advice, local support groups for parents of survivors, articles about trauma responses, so we'd know what to expect when the shock wore off and the anger or numbness cycled in. We didn't speak much. We just shared screens, pointed to paragraphs that resonated, a silent partnership born from years of co-parenting through fevers and school projects, but now deepened by shared helplessness. When Emily woke, she found us there, coffee cups cold, and instead of retreating, she pulled a chair over, asked what we were reading. We showed her. Nothing graphic, just the basics, how common it is to feel guilty or doubt yourself afterwards, how healing isn't linear, how it's okay to need time. She read for a while, scrolling slowly, then closed the laptop. I think maybe I want to talk to someone, a counselor, not the police lady on the hotline, someone who gets it. Relief flooded me, quiet but real. We looked up therapists together, filtering for one's experienced in intimate partner violence, young adults, sliding scale fees since her insurance through the university was spotty. We made a list of 3, no pressure to choose today, and she said she'd think about it, maybe call tomorrow. Dinner that night was takeout, Chinese from the place on Maple we'd gone to since she was little, the same orange chicken she always ordered, fortune cookies cracked open at the table. Hers read, "A new beginning is just around the corner," and she gave a small, wry laugh, the first sound close to humor we'd heard in 24 hours. Cheesy, she muttered, but she tucked the slip into her pocket anyway. When we cleared the cartons and loaded the dishwasher, she lingered in the kitchen while Tom went to watch the news in the other room. "Mom," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "I'm scared he'll find out I told you, that he'll do something." I turned from the sink, dried my hands, and met her eyes. "If he tries anything, we call the police. No hesitation. And until then, we keep you safe. That's the only job right now." She nodded, stepped forward, and let me hug her properly this time, arms around her shoulders, her cheek against my collarbone, the way she used to when she was small and the world felt too big. I held her, until her breathing steadied, until the tension in her back eased a fraction, and when she pulled away, she looked lighter, like some of the weight had shifted onto us where it belonged. That night, as I locked up and turned off lights, I felt the first thin thread of something like hope. Not bright, not certain, but there, because we'd survived the first full day after the truth. We'd set boundaries without breaking her trust, and she'd asked for help on her own terms. It wasn't forgiveness yet, wasn't healing, but it was motion, slow and careful, forward instead of spiraling down. And in the quiet house, with rain tapping the roof again, that felt like enough to carry us into tomorrow. The weekend after Emily's confession felt like the house itself needed air, the walls too close, the routines too fragile to hold the weight we were all carrying. So on Saturday morning, I told Tom and Emily I was taking a short trip, nothing dramatic, just one night away at my friend Sarah's place an hour north, the little cabin she rented on the lake that always smelled faintly of pine and wood smoke. I framed it as needing space to think, to breathe without the constant reminder of Jake's shadow in every room, and they both understood without argument. Emily even hugged me at the door, quick but real, whispering, "Tell Sarah hi," like this was any ordinary weekend visit. Tom drove me to the station, radio off, the silence between us comfortable now instead of tense, and when he pulled up to the curb, he leaned over, kissed my forehead, said, "Call if you need me, or if you just want to talk." I nodded, grabbed my overnight bag, the same duffel I'd used for college weekends 25 years ago, and stepped onto the platform as the train pulled in, the doors hissing open like an invitation to escape, even if only for 36 hours. The ride was quiet, suburbs giving way to patches of bare trees and frozen ponds, my reflection in the window pale and tired, dark circles I hadn't bothered to conceal with makeup. Sarah met me at the small station with her beat-up Subaru. No questions at first, just a quick hug and "I made soup," then drove us the short distance to the cabin while classic rock played low on the stereo. Inside, the place was warm from the wood stove she'd lit earlier, the kind of heat that seeps into your bones, and we settled on the worn plaid couch with mugs of vegetable broth thick with carrots and barley, the steam fogging my glasses. I told her everything, not the polished version I'd rehearsed in my head on the train, but the raw one, the scar on Emily's arm, the bruise on her ribs, the way she'd flinched when I reached for her that first night, how Tom and I had lain awake holding hands like teenagers scared of the dark. Sarah listened without interrupting, her lawyer brain cataloging details, but her friend heart keeping her quiet until I finished. Then she set her mug down, looked at me straight. "You're allowed to be furious. At him, at the system that lets guys like that walk around smiling, at yourself for not seeing it sooner. But don't let the guilt eat you alive. Emily needs you whole." We talked for hours, about boundaries, about what transparency could look like without turning into surveillance, about how to support without smothering. She pulled out her laptop, showed me a document she'd drafted years ago for a client in a similar spot, a simple agreement between partners, or in this case, between parent and adult child, location sharing turned on voluntarily, check-ins at set times, no secrets about contact from him, full access to her phone if she ever felt unsafe and wanted us to look. It's not control, Sarah said. It's a safety net she can step into or out of. The key is she agrees, and you all revisit it regularly. By the time the fire died down to embers and the lake outside reflected a thin moon, we'd typed up a draft. Short, clear bullet points. I'll text when I leave or arrive anywhere for the next month. You can see my location if I say yes. I'll tell you immediately if he reaches out, no matter how small. We talk weekly about how it's feeling. Nothing punitive, nothing permanent. I saved it to my phone, felt a small loosening in my chest at having something concrete to offer instead of just promises. Sunday morning, we walked the trail around the lake, boots crunching on frost-rimmed gravel, breath clouding in the cold air. Sarah asked the question I'd been avoiding. What about you? Are you going to do anything bigger? She meant the idea I'd had that first sleepless night, the reckless plan to confront Jake or expose him myself. I stopped by a fallen log, sat on it, picked at the lichen. I thought about it, driving to his apartment, waiting outside his work, making a scene, or worse, finding his parents, telling them everything in detail so they couldn't pretend it wasn't real. She nodded, waited. But it feels wrong now, like it would make me the one crossing lines, and Emily doesn't need more chaos, she needs steady. If we go that route, it has to be legal, official, on her timeline. Saying it out loud lifted something, turned the fury from a wildfire into a controlled burn I could manage. We walked back, made grilled cheese on the little stovetop, ate standing at the counter like we used to in our 20s, laughing about old boyfriends and bad decisions, the normalcy a balm. When Tom picked me up that evening, Emily in the passenger seat, waving shyly, I felt different. Not fixed, but recalibrated. In the car, Emily asked how the weekend was, casual but curious, and I told her about the soup, the walk, the quiet. Then, gently, Sarah helped me think about some rules we could try. Not orders, just things to keep you safe while you figure out next steps. Want to look at them together tonight? She hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I think I do. Back home, after takeout pizza and a mindless episode of some baking show on Netflix, Emily curled on one end of the couch, Tom on the other, me in the middle with the laptop balanced on my knees, we opened the document. We read it aloud, line by line, editing as we went, added that she could turn location sharing off any time without explanation, that check-ins would stop after she felt ready, that we'd all have veto power if something felt off. By the time we finished, it was past 10, the house quiet except for the dishwasher humming in the background, and Emily saved the file to her phone too. I'll try it, she said, starting tomorrow. No grand declarations, no tears this time, just a small, deliberate yes. Tom squeezed my knee under the blanket, a silent thank you, and when we went to bed later, he pulled me close, murmured against my hair, "You did good this weekend." I didn't feel heroic. I felt tired, relieved, like I'd finally found the right size container for the rage and fear instead of letting it spill everywhere. Down the hall, Emily's light clicked off, the salt lamp glowing faintly under her door, and for the first time since her confession, I fell asleep without replaying worst-case scenarios. The rules we'd written like a thin but real bridge between where we were and wherever came next, sturdy enough to step onto, one careful foot at a time. The first therapy appointment came 2 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon when the sky was the flat, unpromising gray of late winter, and the waiting room smelled faintly of lavender diffusers and old magazines. Emily had chosen Dr. Reyes from the list we'd made together. Late 30s, warm brown eyes in her profile photo, specializes in trauma in young adults, sliding scale fees that fit Emily's part-time bookstore paycheck. And I drove her there after picking her up from campus, the radio tuned low to a public station playing acoustic covers so the silence wouldn't feel too heavy. She sat in the passenger seat, twisting the strap of her crossbody bag, sunglasses on, even though the sun wasn't out, and when we pulled into the small professional building's lot, she took a long breath before opening the door. "You can wait in the car," she said, not unkindly, "or go get coffee. I don't know how long it'll be." I nodded, told her I'd be right here, and watched her walk inside, back straight, steps deliberate, the way she used to approach the high dive at the community pool when she was 9, and determined not to be scared. The hours stretched. I scrolled mindlessly through emails on my phone, answered a work text about a delayed report, sipped lukewarm drive-through coffee that tasted like paper, and tried not to imagine what she was saying in there, what memories she was pulling out into the light for the first time. When she came out, her face was flushed, eyes brighter than when she'd gone in, like she'd been crying, but also like something had loosened. She slid into the seat, buckled up, and for a full minute just stared at the dashboard. Then, quietly, "She believes me," just said it right away. No questions about whether I provoked him or anything. The words landed soft, but seismic. I reached over, rested my hand on her knee for a second, felt her leg relax under the touch. That's good, Em. Really good. On the drive home, we didn't dissect the session. She wasn't ready to share details, and I didn't push, but she volunteered that Dr. Reyes suggested individual sessions first, weekly, maybe group later if she wanted, and that homework might include journaling triggers or practicing grounding exercises when memory surged. At home, Tom had dinner started, pasta with the jarred sauce we kept for nights when cooking felt impossible, and when Emily walked in, she went straight to him, hugged him from behind while he stirred the pot, chin on his shoulder. He froze for a second, surprised, then turned and wrapped his arms around her properly, the wooden spoon dripping onto the tile unnoticed. I stood in the doorway watching, a small ache of gratitude mixing with the ever-present guilt, because this, her reaching out, was new, fragile, a crack in the wall she'd built to keep everyone at arm's length. Over dinner, we kept it light. She talked about a customer who'd argued over a bookstore coupon. Tom told a story about a co-worker's Zoom background fail involving a very confused cat. And I mentioned a funny client email that had come in that day. No heavy topics, no probing, just the ordinary rhythm of forks on plates, the clink of glasses, the way the overhead light caught the steam rising from the bowls. After we cleared the table, Emily disappeared upstairs for a bit, came back down with a small spiral notebook, plain black cover, the kind you buy at the drugstore, and set it on the kitchen island. Dr. Reyes said writing might help. Not everything, just what comes up, so I don't have to carry it all in my head. She opened it to the first page, already half filled with her neat, slanted handwriting, a list of things that felt safe right now. Coffee in the morning with Mom and Dad, the sound of the dishwasher, walking the dog around the block without looking over my shoulder. Tom read it over her shoulder, then added in his blocky print at the bottom, watching hockey with Emily on Sundays. She smiled, small, real, and I felt my throat tighten. That night, after she'd gone to bed, I started my own therapy. I'd booked it quietly the week before. Same practice, different therapist. Dr. Patel, a woman in her 50s with a calm voice on the intake call, and my first session was virtual, laptop on the kitchen table after Tom had retreated to the basement to tinker with an old bike he was restoring. I sat in the dark except for the screen glow, webcam on, and when Dr. Patel asked why I was there, I surprised myself by starting with the guilt instead of the anger. I didn't see it, I said, voice cracking on the first sentence. 2 years she was with him, coming home quieter each time, wearing long sleeves even in July, canceling plans, and I thought it was college stress, boy drama, normal growing pains. I smiled at him over dinner. I told her he seemed nice. The tears came fast then, hot and embarrassing, and Dr. Patel waited, handed me a virtual tissue box in the way therapists do, let me cry until the worst of it passed. We talked about the myth of perfect maternal radar, how abusers are skilled at performing normalcy, how self-blame is a common trap for parents in these situations. By the end of the 50 minutes, I felt wrung out, but lighter, like I'd finally named the thing that had been choking me. When the call ended, I stayed at the table, staring at the blank screen, then opened my phone and texted Emily one floor up. "You okay?" A minute later, her reply, "Yeah, you?" I typed back, starting to be. Small vulnerability, but it felt like progress. The next morning, Emily came down early, still in pajamas, hair messy, and poured herself cereal while I made toast. She sat across from me, spoon clinking against the bowl, and after a few bites said, "I told Dr. Reyes about the safety plan we made. She said it's good, shows I trust you guys." I looked up from my coffee. "Do you?" She considered it, nodded slowly, more than I did a month ago. Then tentative, "Maybe we could do something together this weekend, all three of us. Nothing big, just normal." Tom, coming in from his run, caught the tail end and grinned, first real one I'd seen in weeks. Movie night or that new arcade place downtown? Emily shrugged, but her eyes were brighter. Arcade sounds fun. It wasn't a hug, wasn't a deep confession, but it was her reaching across the gap instead of waiting for us to bridge it. Later that day, I forwarded her a photo of the arcade's neon sign from their website, added a silly emoji, and she replied with a thumbs up and a heart. Small gestures, but they stacked like stones in a path, each one making the next step feel less impossible. In the quiet hours after everyone was asleep, I sat on the couch with my own notebook, nothing fancy, just a legal pad from the office, and wrote the first entry. Today, I admitted I failed her, and the world didn't end. Tomorrow, I'll try to show up better. It wasn't poetry, wasn't resolution, but it was honest, and in the dim lamplight with the house breathing around me, that felt like the start of something real. Tentative contact not just with Emily, but with the version of myself I wanted to be for her, for Tom, for the family we were slowly, carefully rebuilding, one small, shared moment at a time. The first joint session with Dr. Reyes happened 3 weeks after Emily's individual starts, on a rainy Tuesday evening when the office parking lot reflected the neon sign from the strip mall across the street in shallow puddles, and I felt my stomach knot tighter with every wiper sweep on the drive over. Tom drove this time, knuckles pale on the wheel, radio off. Emily sat in the back seat staring out the window, earbuds in but no music playing. She'd told me earlier she just liked the feeling of the cords against her neck, a small tether to the present when her thoughts tried to drag her back. We'd agreed to this family meeting after her third solo session, when she'd come home quieter than usual but not withdrawn, said Dr. Reyes thought it might help to have us in the room together for 1 hour. No pressure to spill everything, just a chance to name what was still hard and what was starting to feel possible. I'd spent the previous night lying awake beside Tom rehearsing what I wouldn't say. No apologies that sounded like excuses, no promises I couldn't keep, just honest listening. And he'd done the same, whispering in the dark that he was scared he'd cry and make it about him, but he'd go anyway because she'd asked us to. The waiting room was the same soft beige as before, a few abstract prints on the walls, a fish tank bubbling in the corner with bright orange tetras darting like forgotten thoughts. When Dr. Reyes opened the door, she smiled, not the wide reassuring one from her website photo, but something smaller, more real, and led us into a larger room with 4 upholstered chairs arranged in a loose square, a low table between them holding a box of tissues and 3 water bottles still sealed. We sat, Emily closest to the window, Tom beside her, me across, and for the first minute, the only sound was rain tapping the glass and the faint hum of the heater kicking on. Dr. Reyes started gently. Emily asked if we could all be here tonight because there are things she wants to say and things she wants to hear from both of you. No one has to speak until they're ready, and we can stop any time. Emily nodded, pulled her knees up, hugged them to her chest like she used to during thunderstorms when she was little, then looked at us both, first Tom, then me, and said, voice steady but thin, I need to tell you the deeper stuff, not just the hitting, the way he made me feel like I was nothing without him, like if I left, I'd disappear. She talked about the slow erosion, how he'd criticize her clothes until she stopped wearing anything bright, how he'd mock her dreams of grad school until she started saying maybe it wasn't worth it, how after every fight he'd buy her flowers or take her to dinner and act like the perfect boyfriend so she'd doubt her own memory of the night before. Each word felt like it was being pulled from somewhere deep, and I watched Tom's face, jaw tight, eyes glistening, but he stayed silent, letting her fill the space. When she paused, Dr. Reyes asked softly, what do you need from your parents right now, Emily? She looked at me first. I need to know you're not going to blame yourself forever, because I see it in your face every morning, Mom. The way you watch me like you're waiting for me to break again. It makes me feel like I'm still fragile. The honesty stung, but it was clean, necessary. I swallowed, nodded. I'm trying to stop. I hate that I missed it, Em. I hate that I let him in our house, that I laughed at his jokes, but I'm working on carrying that without making it your burden. She held my gaze a long beat, then turned to Tom. And Dad, I need you to stop wanting to fix it with plans and lists. I know you're scared, but when you talk about lawyers and restraining orders every time I mention his name, it feels like you think I can't handle it myself. Tom exhaled hard, rubbed his palms on his thighs. I do think you can. I wasn't there to protect you before. I keep replaying every time you came home quiet, and I asked if everything was okay, and you said yes, and I believed you, because it was easier than pushing. His voice cracked on the last word, and he looked down, shoulders shaking once before he steadied them. I'm sorry, for not seeing, for not asking harder. Emily reached over then, slow, deliberate, and placed her hand on his forearm, left it there. I know you're sorry. I just need you to believe I'm getting stronger, not weaker. Dr. Reyes let the silence settle, then asked if anyone wanted to name what was shifting. I spoke first, surprising myself. I feel hope. Not big, not loud, but when you reach for us, like hugging Dad in the kitchen or asking for arcade night, it feels like we're not broken beyond repair. Tom added, quieter, I feel less helpless, like we're on the same team again. Emily looked between us, eyes shining but not spilling over. I feel safer. Not safe yet, but closer. Toward the end of the hour, Dr. Reyes suggested a small exercise. If we were comfortable, each of us could offer one physical gesture of connection, hand-holding, a shoulder touch, whatever felt right, and hold it for 30 seconds without speaking. Emily hesitated, then extended both hands, palms up, one toward each of us. Tom took her right hand first, fingers curling around hers carefully, like he was afraid of breaking something. I took her left, my thumb brushing the inside of her wrist, where her pulse beat steady and alive. We sat like that, linked, the rain outside steady now instead of frantic, and I felt the warmth travel up my arm, through my chest, loosening the knot that had lived there since the night she told us. No one spoke, we just breathed together, the clock on the wall ticking softly until Dr. Reyes said time was up. When we stood to leave, Emily didn't drop our hands right away. She squeezed once, twice, then let go, but the contact lingered like an afterimage. In the car on the way home, Tom drove again, Emily in the front this time, me in the back, and no one turned on the radio. At a red light, she reached over, rested her hand on his shoulder for a second. He covered it with his own, held it there until the light changed green. Back home, we didn't make a production of it. No big dinner, no forced celebration. Just heated leftovers, ate at the kitchen table with the overhead light dimmed, and talked about nothing important. The new exhibit at the art museum downtown, whether we should repaint the guest room, how the neighbor's dog kept digging under the fence. After dishes, Emily lingered while Tom and I loaded the dishwasher. Thanks for coming tonight, she said, voice low. It was hard, but good. I turned, dried my hands on a towel. Anytime you want us there, we'll be there. She nodded, then, unexpectedly, stepped forward and hugged me, arms around my waist, head tucked under my chin, like she used to when she was 13 and still let me hold her through the hard days. I wrapped my arms around her shoulders, felt her ribs rise and fall, smelled the faint citrus of her shampoo, and for the first time since the confession, the embrace didn't feel like compensation for past failures. It felt like presence, mutual and whole. When she pulled away, she looked at Tom, too, offered the same hug, he bent slightly to meet her, and when they separated, he kissed the top of her head, quick and light. We said goodnight in the hallway, doors closing softly, and later, in bed, Tom and I lay facing each other, hands linked between us on the mattress. That hand-holding thing, Tom whispered, it didn't expect it to feel so big. I nodded in the dark, like we're starting to stitch things together again. Not new fabric, scarred, but stronger where the needle went through. Sleep came easier that night, not dreamless, but quieter, and when I woke to the sound of rain still falling, I didn't dread the day ahead. I felt a tentative beginning of trust, not blind, not complete, but real enough to build on. One shared hour, one held hand, one honest word at a time. The family trip we chose wasn't ambitious. No cross-country drive or resort with pools and buffets. Just a long weekend at a small cabin rental 2 hours north. The same lake area where I'd gone to see Sarah a month earlier. But this time, all three of us. Booked for Friday through Monday because Emily had said, quietly over breakfast one morning in early April, I think I could handle being away from home. With you guys. Somewhere quiet. The words had landed soft but significant. We didn't overreact, just nodded, looked up availability on my phone right there at the table while coffee cooled, and reserved the place with the screened porch overlooking the water, the one with the Adirondack chairs and the fire pit that promised s'mores, even if the nights were still cool enough for jackets. Packing was simple. Emily folded her favorite hoodie and jeans into the duffel she'd used for sleepovers in high school. Tom loaded the cooler with sandwich fixings and fruit. I tossed in board games we hadn't touched in years. Settlers of Catan, an old deck of Uno, the Scrabble set with missing tiles we always joked about. And by Friday afternoon, we were on the highway, windows cracked to let in the first real smell of spring. Damp earth and budding trees, the radio playing a playlist Emily had made, indie folk mostly, songs with lyrics about healing and second chances that felt chosen but not forced. The drive passed in easy stretches of silence and small talk, Tom pointing out a hawk circling above a field, me remembering the time we'd taken Emily to this same lake when she was 6, and she'd caught her first fish, a tiny perch she'd insisted on throwing back because it had a family waiting. She laughed at the memory, real and unguarded, and when our eyes met in the rearview, she didn't look away. The cabin was smaller than the photo suggested, wood-paneled walls, a stone fireplace, one bedroom with a queen bed, and a loft with twin mattresses, but it felt right, cozy, without being confining. We unpacked slowly, claiming spaces. Emily took the loft because she liked the slanted ceiling and the little window that looked straight up at the stars. Tom and I the downstairs room with the quilt that smelled faintly of cedar. Dinner that first night was grilled cheese and tomato soup on the porch, rain starting again as we ate, fat drops drumming on the metal roof while we watched the lake turn silver gray. No phones at the table, we'd agreed on that rule loosely, no strict no-screen policy, but a mutual understanding that this weekend was for being present. And after we cleared the dishes, Emily suggested a walk down to the dock, even though the rain was steady now. We pulled on rain jackets, hoods up, and stepped out, the path slick with pine needles, flashlights from our phones cutting pale beams through the dusk. At the water's edge, the rain softened to mist, and we stood shoulder to shoulder watching ripples spread from where drops hit the surface. Emily spoke first, voice almost lost in the patter. I keep thinking about how I used to come here in my head when things got bad with him. Imagined jumping in the lake and swimming until I couldn't anymore. Not to, but just to feel something else. Tom's breath caught audibly. I felt my own chest tighten. She kept going. But I never did, and now I'm actually here, with you, and it feels different, like the place held the bad thoughts for me until I could come back and take them away. No one spoke for a long minute. Then Tom reached out, tentative, and put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into it without stiffening. I stepped to her other side, linked my arm through hers, and we stood like that, 3 points of a small, damp triangle, until the cold started seeping through our shoes, and we turned back up the path, silent but not empty. Saturday brought tentative sun, enough to warm the dock, and we spent the morning reading on the porch, Emily with the novel she'd borrowed from the bookstore, Tom with an engineering journal he pretended to understand on vacation, me with nothing but a mug of tea and the view. Lunch was sandwiches by the water, then Emily suggested kayaking. The rental place down the shore had doubles, so we took 2, Tom and me in one, her in her own. On the lake, the paddling was slow, clumsy at first, Tom and I out of sync until we found a rhythm, and Emily pulled ahead, laughing when she spun in a circle by accident, calling back, "You guys are so slow." The sound of her laugh over open water felt like medicine, bright and unforced. Halfway across, she stopped, let her kayak drift, waited for us to catch up. When we were close enough, she said, I want to tell you something I told Dr. Reyes last week. I don't hate him anymore, not like I did. I'm still angry, still scared sometimes when I see a car like his or hear a voice that sounds like his, but the hate was eating me. Letting it go doesn't mean forgiving him, it means I get to keep the space he was taking up. Tom's breath caught audibly. I felt my own chest tighten. She kept going. But I never did, and now I'm actually here, with you, and it feels different, like the place held the bad thoughts for me until I could come back and take them away. No one spoke for a long minute. Then Tom reached out, tentative, and put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into it without stiffening. I stepped to her other side, linked my arm through hers, and we stood like that, 3 points of a small, damp triangle, until the cold started seeping through our shoes, and we turned back up the path, silent but not empty. Saturday brought tentative sun, enough to warm the dock, and we spent the morning reading on the porch, Emily with the novel she'd borrowed from the bookstore, Tom with an engineering journal he pretended to understand on vacation, me with nothing but a mug of tea and the view. Lunch was sandwiches by the water, then Emily suggested kayaking. The rental place down the shore had doubles, so we took 2, Tom and me in one, her in her own. On the lake, the paddling was slow, clumsy at first, Tom and I out of sync until we found a rhythm, and Emily pulled ahead, laughing when she spun in a circle by accident, calling back, "You guys are so slow." The sound of her laugh over open water felt like medicine, bright and unforced. Halfway across, she stopped, let her kayak drift, waited for us to catch up. When we were close enough, she said, "I want to tell you something I told Dr. Reyes last week. I don't hate him anymore, not like I did. I'm still angry, still scared sometimes when I see a car like his or hear a voice that sounds like his, but the hate was eating me. Letting it go doesn't mean forgiving him. It means I get to keep the space he was taking up." Tom's breath caught audibly. I felt my own chest tighten. She kept going. "But I never did, and now I'm actually here, with you, and it feels different, like the place held the bad thoughts for me until I could come back and take them away." No one spoke for a long minute. Then Tom reached out, tentative, and put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into it without stiffening. I stepped to her other side, linked my arm through hers, and we stood like that, 3 points of a small, damp triangle, until the cold started seeping through our shoes, and we turned back up the path, silent but not empty. Saturday brought tentative sun, enough to warm the dock, and we spent the morning reading on the porch, Emily with the novel she'd borrowed from the bookstore, Tom with an engineering journal he pretended to understand on vacation, me with nothing but a mug of tea and the view. Lunch was sandwiches by the water, then Emily suggested kayaking. The rental place down the shore had doubles, so we took 2, Tom and me in one, her in her own. On the lake, the paddling was slow, clumsy at first, Tom and I out of sync until we found a rhythm, and Emily pulled ahead, laughing when she spun in a circle by accident, calling back, "You guys are so slow." The sound of her laugh over open water felt like medicine, bright and unforced. Halfway across, she stopped, let her kayak drift, waited for us to catch up. When we were close enough, she said, "I want to tell you something I told Dr. Reyes last week. I don't hate him anymore, not like I did. I'm still angry, still scared sometimes when I see a car like his or hear a voice that sounds like his, but the hate was eating me. Letting it go doesn't mean forgiving him. It means I get to keep the space he was taking up." Tom's breath caught audibly. I felt my own chest tighten. She kept going. "But I never did, and now I'm actually here, with you, and it feels different, like the place held the bad thoughts for me until I could come back and take them away." No one spoke for a long minute. Then Tom reached out, tentative, and put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into it without stiffening. I stepped to her other side, linked my arm through hers, and we stood like that, 3 points of a small, damp triangle, until the cold started seeping through our shoes, and we turned back up the path, silent but not empty. Saturday brought tentative sun, enough to warm the dock, and we spent the morning reading on the porch, Emily with the novel she'd borrowed from the bookstore, Tom with an engineering journal he pretended to understand on vacation, me with nothing but a mug of tea and the view. Lunch was sandwiches by the water, then Emily suggested kayaking. The rental place down the shore had doubles, so we took 2, Tom and me in one, her in her own. On the lake, the paddling was slow, clumsy at first, Tom and I out of sync until we found a rhythm, and Emily pulled ahead, laughing when she spun in a circle by accident, calling back, "You guys are so slow." The sound of her laugh over open water felt like medicine, bright and unforced. Halfway across, she stopped, let her kayak drift, waited for us to catch up. When we were close enough, she said, "I want to tell you something I told Dr. Reyes last week. I don't hate him anymore, not like I did. I'm still angry, still scared sometimes when I see a car like his or hear a voice that sounds like his, but the hate was eating me. Letting it go doesn't mean forgiving him. It means 1 year to the day after Emily first sat on our living room couch and said the words that changed everything, the house looked almost the same on that mid-February afternoon. Same gray February light slanting through the kitchen windows, same coffee maker gurgling on the counter, same faint scent of the lemon cleaner I use on the floors, but the air inside felt different, lighter, like a room that's been aired out after a long winter. I stood at the island chopping onions for chili, the knife moving in steady rhythm while the radio played low jazz from the old station Tom still tunes to on weekends, and Emily came through the back door from her shift at the expanded bookstore downtown, now full-time while she finishes her last semester online, snow melting off her boots in small puddles on the mat. She kicked them off, hung her coat, and without preamble, walked over, leaned her head on my shoulder for a second, the way she used to when she was small and tired after school, then stole a slice of red pepper from the cutting board. "Smells good already," she said, voice easy, no trace of the hesitation that used to linger in every sentence. Tom came in from the garage a minute later, wiping grease from his hands on a rag. He'd been tinkering with the old hybrid's brakes all morning, a project he'd started partly to keep busy, and partly because fixing something mechanical felt like proof he could still protect what mattered. And he paused in the doorway, looked at us both standing there together, and smiled the quiet, private smile that had returned to his face over the months. "Chilly night," he said, unnecessary but pleased, then crossed to the fridge for beer, offering one to Emily without asking if she wanted it. She took it, twisted the cap, clinked it against his bottle in the small ritual they'd fallen into since the lake trip last spring. We ate at the table instead of in front of the TV, another small shift that had settled in naturally over the year. Bowls steaming, cornbread crumbling on plates, conversation drifting from her upcoming thesis presentation on trauma-informed library programming to Tom's promotion that had finally come through last month, quieter responsibilities but better hours, to my decision to cut back client hours so I could volunteer at the local domestic violence resource center 2 afternoons a week. No one forced the topic. It came up the way ordinary life does, woven in with stories about coworkers and funny customer interactions, and whether we should repaint the hallway that still bore the faint scuff marks from when Emily used to drag her backpack along the wall. After dinner, we cleared the table together, elbows brushing in the small kitchen, and Emily loaded the dishwasher while Tom wiped counters, and I poured leftover chili into containers for lunches. When the last dish was in, she turned, leaned against the sink, and said, casual but deliberate, "It's been a year today, since I told you." The words hung there gentle, not heavy, and we all paused, Tom with the sponge in his hand, me with a Tupperware lid half closed, acknowledging the marker without letting it swallow the room. "Yeah," I said softly, "it has." She looked between us, eyes clear. I thought I'd feel, I don't know, different on this day. Worse, maybe, or like I had to do something big to mark it. But I just feel here, with you guys, and that's enough. Tom set the sponge down, stepped closer, rested a hand on her shoulder. "We're here too, kid, all the way." She nodded, then, unexpected but not startling, pulled us both into a hug, arms around our waists, head tucked between us the way she used to when she was little, and the 3 of us would pile on the couch during thunderstorms. I felt Tom's arm come around my back, felt her heartbeat steady against my side, smelled the faint trace of bookstore paper and winter air on her hair, and for a long minute we stood like that in the warm kitchen light, no one speaking, just breathing together. When we separated, she wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand, laughed a little self-consciously. "Okay, no more mush. Movie?" We chose an old favorite, something light, a comedy we'd watched a dozen times before Jake, during Jake, after Jake, and settled on the couch. Emily in the middle this time, blanket pulled over all 3 laps, popcorn bowl balanced on her knees. Halfway through, she rested her head on my shoulder. A little later, she reached for Tom's hand on the other side, laced her fingers through his. Small gestures, but they carried the weight of everything we'd walked through. The nights of separate beds and separate fears, the therapy hours where truths were named without flinching, the lake weekend where laughter came back like a gift, the slow months of check-ins that turned into trust, the way we'd learned to hold space for anger and grief without letting them define us. The movie ended, credits rolling, and Emily didn't move right away. She just sat there, breathing, then said quietly, "I'm not the same person I was a year ago, and I'm glad. Not glad it happened, never that, but glad I'm here now, stronger in the broken places, I guess." Tom squeezed her hand. "We're here too, kid, all the way." She nodded, then, unexpected but not startling, pulled us both into a hug, arms around our waists, head tucked between us the way she used to when she was little, and the 3 of us would pile on the couch during thunderstorms. I felt Tom's arm come around my back, felt her heartbeat steady against my side, smelled the faint trace of bookstore paper and winter air on her hair, and for a long minute we stood like that in the warm kitchen light, no one speaking, just breathing together. When we separated, she wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand, laughed a little self-consciously. "Okay, no more mush. Movie?" We chose an old favorite, something light, a comedy we'd watched a dozen times before Jake, during Jake, after Jake, and settled on the couch. Emily in the middle this time, blanket pulled over all 3 laps, popcorn bowl balanced on her knees. Halfway through, she rested her head on my shoulder. A little later, she reached for Tom's hand on the other side, laced her fingers through his. Small gestures, but they carried the weight of everything we'd walked through. The nights of separate beds and separate fears, the therapy hours where truths were named without flinching, the lake weekend where laughter came back like a gift, the slow months of check-ins that turned into trust, the way we'd learned to hold space for anger and grief without letting them define us. The movie ended, credits rolling, and Emily didn't move right away. She just sat there, breathing, then said quietly, "I'm not the same person I was a year ago, and I'm glad. Not glad it happened, never that, but glad I'm here now, stronger in the broken places, I guess." Tom squeezed her hand. "We're here too, kid, all the way." She nodded, then, unexpected but not startling, pulled us both into a hug, arms around our waists, head tucked between us the way she used to when she was little, and the 3 of us would pile on the couch during thunderstorms. I felt Tom's arm come around my back, felt her heartbeat steady against my side, smelled the faint trace of bookstore paper and winter air on her hair, and for a long minute we stood like that in the warm kitchen light, no one speaking, just breathing together. When we separated, she wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand, laughed a little self-consciously. "Okay, no more mush. Movie?" We chose an old favorite, something light, a comedy we'd watched a dozen times before Jake, during Jake, after Jake, and settled on the couch. Emily in the middle this time, blanket pulled over all 3 laps, popcorn bowl balanced on her knees. Halfway through, she rested her head on my shoulder. A little later, she reached for Tom's hand on the other side, laced her fingers through his. Small gestures, but they carried the weight of everything we'd walked through. The nights of separate beds and separate fears, the therapy hours where truths were named without flinching, the lake weekend where laughter came back like a gift, the slow months of check-ins that turned into trust, the way we'd learned to hold space for anger and grief without letting them define us. The movie ended, credits rolling, and Emily didn't move right away. She just sat there, breathing, then said quietly, "I'm not the same person I was a year ago, and I'm glad. Not glad it happened, never that, but glad I'm here now, stronger in the broken places, I guess." Tom squeezed her hand. "We're here too, kid, all the way." She nodded, then, unexpected but not startling, pulled us both into a hug, arms around our waists, head tucked between us the way she used to when she was little, and the three of us would pile on the couch during thunderstorms. I felt Tom's arm come around my back, felt her heartbeat steady against my side, smelled the faint trace of bookstore paper and winter air on her hair, and for a long minute we stood like that in the warm kitchen light, no one speaking, just breathing together. When we separated, she wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand, laughed a little self-consciously. "Okay, no more mush. Movie?" We chose an old favorite, something light, a comedy we'd watched a dozen times before Jake, during Jake, after Jake, and settled on the couch. Emily in the middle this time, blanket pulled over all three laps, popcorn bowl balanced on her knees. Halfway through, she rested her head on my shoulder. A little later, she reached for Tom's hand on the other side, laced her fingers through his. Small gestures, but they carried the weight of everything we'd walked through. The nights of separate beds and separate fears, the therapy hours where truths were named without flinching, the lake weekend where laughter came back like a gift, the slow months of check-ins that turned into trust, the way we'd learned to hold space.